dark. Red and blue views, truth in the middle. No script, just thought raw and a little civil. Every question's got layers, so we peel back facts. From the real to the surreal, we don't hold back. Voices collide where ideas ignite. You tuned in, now step into the fight. This is more than talk, this is thought that counts. Welcome to the feed where the signal mounts.
Okay, so you know that feeling when your whole relationship landscape feels less like a straightforward path and more like this big confusing crossroads?
Yeah.
Maybe you're navigating it yourself, or maybe you're just sort of fascinated by the twists and turns people find themselves in.
Absolutely.
Either way, modern relationships can be, well, a real roller coaster sometimes.
They certainly can. And, one thing that just keeps cropping up, doesn't it? Both like in real life and definitely all over our screens is the classic love triangle.
Right. It's a term we all pretty much instantly recognize. Exactly. And today we're actually taking a deep dive into this whole often quite dramatic situation. We've got two main angles we're looking at with our sources.
Okay.
First, there's this really lively open panel discussion from YouTube. And they ask, point blank, are love triangles promoted in mainstream and social media?
Ah, interesting question.
Yeah. And then second, we're going to unpack some really insightful advice from a relationship coach. She was guiding a listener who was like caught right in the middle of one.
Right. So different perspectives there. Our mission really with this deep dive is kind of twofold. We want to explore just how prevalent these love triangles are, in media and society. But maybe more importantly, we want to try and understand the dynamics underneath it all and the potential pitfalls, the harms that can come with them.
Okay, let's dive right in then. My first thought about love triangles, honestly, they just sound like a total headache. Like a recipe for just unnecessary drama, hurt feelings.
Definitely seems that way.
Yeah.
The folks on that YouTube panel, they seem to pretty much agree with you right off the bat.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, the host jumps in almost immediately with a really strong negative take, calls them something that just causes, division and negativity. Basically, a load of crap, I think was the phrasing.
Right. Doesn't mince words. And they get straight to that big question. Are love triangles promoted in mainstream and social media? That really sets the scene for the whole discussion.
It does. And what's quite striking, actually, is the panel host shares this very personal and honestly quite sobering story right near the beginning.
Oh, what was that?
It talks about a violent incident in his local area that tragically came directly from a love triangle situation.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it really hammers home that these aren't just, plot devices in shows. They can have incredibly real, incredibly serious consequences in people's actual lives.
Absolutely. That definitely shifts the perspective. It's not just entertainment fodder then. Okay, let's pivot a bit to our other source, the advice from the relationship coach, Susan Winter.
Yes, Susan. So she was responding to this question from a listener, Audra, I think from Paris.
Right.
And Audra was in that really, really frustrating spot where someone she was interested in seemed just as non-committal to her as they were to another person. Yeah, basically keeping both of them sort of hanging in limbo while they supposedly figured things out.
Oh, that sounds awful for Audra, to really like someone but feel like you're just one of the options on the table. So what was Susan Winter's first reaction to that?
Well, Winter didn't pull any punches. She basically described that kind of behavior as coming from an entitled, selfish person, someone who's really just taking advantage of the looser rules and maybe the freedom in modern dating.
That is pretty blunt. But did she acknowledge that maybe there are wider dating trends involved? You mentioned something about millennials exploring options.
Exactly. She did recognize that.
Yeah.
Some people might genuinely be trying to figure out what they want in a partner, or maybe even approaching dating like a numbers game.
Okay.
But her main concern really is when this leads to people becoming what she called the fall guy, or, the backup plan.
Right. The person left hanging.
Yeah. And she even raised the interesting point that it might not always be one-sided manipulation. Sometimes people, she mentioned women, particularly if they're feeling insecure, might sort of create their own backup plans too.
Huh. That's an interesting angle. But Winter really focused on that feeling of being stuck, right? Of just waiting around.
Absolutely. She really zeroed in on that feeling. You're ready for something real, you like this person, but you're just being held back by their indecision, their stalling, or maybe them just, exploiting the situation.
And she talked about the pressure to just like put up with it, especially for women.
Yes, she had some strong words about that societal conditioning, that pressure often on women to not complain or express dissatisfaction because you'll be labeled
crazy or insecure.
Exactly. That whole just be chill, go with the flow thing, even when it feels totally wrong.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. Like you're supposed to just tolerate endless uncertainty. But Winter's advice to Audra was pretty clear cut, wasn't it?
Oh, very clear. She told Audra straight up, you shouldn't have to deal with this. Full stop. Her point was this kind of ongoing uncertainty, this lack of commitment, it's not something anyone should just accept as like the norm.
Okay. And she mentioned her 3-month rule, but sounds like that's changed a bit.
Yeah, it seems the original idea was maybe about giving things time to solidify. But her updated view, the one she really pushes now, is much more immediate, more self-protective.
How so?
Basically, if someone you're dating is still actively seeing other people after just, say, a couple of dates, and that bothers you, her advice is don't wait. Don't hang around waiting for them to choose.
Wow, okay. That's definitely empowering. Puts the focus back on your own feelings, your own comfort level.
Exactly.
And she had a really key point about how people act when they're actually interested, didn't she?
Yes, that was crucial. She stressed that when someone genuinely likes you, truly likes you, they make time for you. You become a priority.
Not just fitting you in.
Right. Marking time, as she called it, just shows they aren't really invested. There's a huge difference between, casual dating and someone actively juggling multiple people with no real intention.
Okay. And she brought it back to that idea of self-worth, too.
Absolutely. She's a strong advocate for honoring yourself, recognizing your own value. You shouldn't have to wait for someone else to see your worth. You need to know it yourself.
So the takeaway there is pretty clear. Know your worth, set your boundaries, don't wait for someone who isn't all in.
That's the essence of it. Know your value, state your needs early, and walk away if they're not being met.
And her final thought kind of wrapped it all up, questioning if someone who puts you through that is even someone you'd want long-term anyway.
Exactly. She basically asks, is this entitled, selfish, spoiled person, her words, who creates this mess? Is that really the kind of partner you want? Especially since, even good relationships have enough challenges without adding this drama.
Right. So it sounds like the coach's view is pretty firmly against getting tangled up in these ambiguous messes. Now, the second source, the second video, took a much darker turn, didn't it? Focusing on narcissistic triangulation tactics.
Yes, definitely darker.
Yeah.
This video looked at 5 destructive narcissistic triangulation tactics. And it's important here, I think, to draw a distinction. Some triangles might just be about immaturity or indecision, like the coach discussed, but others are a deliberate, manipulative strategy used purely for control and dominance.
Okay, so how did they define triangulation in that context? The manipulative kind.
Right. So in the narcissistic context, triangulation is specifically bringing a third party, it could be a person, could even be a group, into a relationship dynamic specifically to gain power. It's basically divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer.
And a really key part of it is that the people being triangulated, they often have very limited or even direct contact with each other.
So the manipulator controls the information flow.
Precisely. That allows the narcissist to completely control the narrative each person gets. They manage the whole dynamic that way.
That makes sense. If they can't compare notes, they're stuck with the manipulator's version. Okay, so let's get into these 5 tactics. The first one was playing people off against each other. What does that actually look like?
So this is where the narcissist makes one person feel inadequate, not good enough, by constantly comparing them, maybe subtly, maybe overtly, to someone else.
And this can happen anywhere, not just romance.
Oh yeah, romantic relationships, friendships, work, even families. The whole goal is to create an insecurity, make the target constantly seek the narcissist's approval, always worried they'll lose favor.
Can you give some examples? Like, what would someone actually hear? Comparing them to an ex, maybe?
Exactly that. Or constantly talking about how someone else looks better or is smarter or more successful in friendships, maybe praising another friend while subtly putting the target down.
Or at work, like a boss constantly praising one employee over another.
Right. Or the classic family dynamic, the golden child who can do no wrong versus the scapegoat who gets blamed for everything.
And the video mentioned that both people being played off might be hearing bad things about each other.
Yes. That's a key part of the manipulation. The narcissist might tell person A how much better person B is in some way, while telling person B the opposite about person A. It keeps both people feeling insecure and competing for the narcissist's attention, which of course just boosts the narcissist's sense of power.
Okay, wow. The second tactic, the idolize and devalue switch. That sounds particularly nasty.
It really is. It's incredibly destabilizing and very common in narcissistic romantic relationships. What happens is the narcissist alternates, right? They intensely idealize one person, showering them with affection, praise, attention.
Love bombing, essentially.
Pretty much. And then suddenly they switch. They start devaluing that same person, criticizing them, withdrawing affection, making them feel worthless. And while they're doing that to person A, they might be doing the exact opposite with person B in the triangle.
Can you give an example of how that might play out?
Well, a classic scenario is the narcissist intensely pursuing a new partner, really idealizing them, while at the same time becoming cold and critical towards their current partner.
Okay.
Then, maybe weeks or months later, it flips. The new partner suddenly gets the criticism and cold shoulder, while the old partner might get apologies, promises, renewed attention. It's this exhausting, confusing cycle.
What's the point?
It's about control, creating dependence, and getting what narcissists crave. Attention and emotional reaction, often called narcissistic supply. The drama itself feeds their ego, and they might be lying to both people the whole time to keep it going.
That sounds incredibly damaging emotionally. Does the video talk about how that feels for the people involved?
It does. It highlights that even if the targets aren't fully aware of the extent of the other relationship, they nearly always have this gut feeling.
Yeah.
That something is just wrong.
Like a constant sense of unease.
Exactly. Maybe constant mentions of the other person that just feel off. And sadly, sometimes both people do become aware of the whole picture, but they feel trapped.
Trapped how?
By what's often called a trauma bond. It's this intense emotional connection that can form in abusive dynamics, making it incredibly hard to leave, even when you know it's harmful.
Okay. The third tactic was inappropriate relationships. This isn't always about cheating, right?
Not necessarily in the traditional sense. It's more about the narcissist maintaining a relationship. Could be a super close friend, a sibling, even a parent that feels like it competes with the primary partnership. It makes the partner feel secondary, unimportant, maybe even replaced.
So like spending way more emotional energy on this other person.
Yeah, or maybe sharing deep secrets with them that they don't share with their partner, including them in things while excluding the partner. Often, this inappropriate relationship is with someone who could be seen as a romantic rival, like an ex they claim is just a friend.
The just friends line.
Right. And if the partner dares to raise concerns, what happens?
They get accused of being jealous, paranoid, controlling.
Bingo. The narcissist flips it, deflects blame, makes the partner feel like they're the problem. And of course, as the video notes, sometimes these inappropriate relationships are actually romantic or sexual, which just adds another layer of betrayal.
Huge red flag. Okay, tactic number 4.
Fourth one is using allies, real or imagined. This is when, maybe in an argument, the narcissist brings up other people who supposedly agree with them and disagree with the partner.
Like everyone thinks you're wrong about this.
Exactly. My colleagues all say I'm right, or even my therapist thinks you're being unreasonable, or my ex used to say you were too sensitive too. It's designed to make the partner feel ashamed, isolated, doubt their own judgment.
And they probably can't even check if it's true.
Usually not. The narcissist often counts on that. They might refuse to say who these supposed allies are. Oh, I can't betray their confidence. Or just make it sound like this vague consensus against the partner. It's a classic move when they're being held accountable.
Okay. And the final tactic sounds the most heartbreaking. Using children against you.
Yeah, this one is particularly destructive, often seen during or after separation or divorce. The narcissistic parent tries to turn the kids against the other parent. By bad-mouthing the other parent, twisting situations, controlling communication, basically poisoning the relationship. It's called parental alienation. They paint themselves as the perfect, good parent and the other as flawed or harmful.
That's awful for the kids.
Terrible. They might even share adult information or secrets with the kids to create distrust. And then when the targeted parent naturally gets upset or reacts to this manipulation, the narcissist points to that reaction as proof of how unstable they are. It's a vicious cycle.
Just incredibly painful. So faced with all this, this manipulation, what does the video say is the way out? Is there one?
Yes, thankfully, the video is very clear. The most effective, really the only effective way to deal with narcissistic triangulation is emotional detachment and focusing on your own inner healing.
So trying to argue or reason with them is pointless.
Worse than pointless. It often just feeds the dynamic. Engaging emotionally gives them the reaction they want. You have to disengage, create distance.
Emotionally distance yourself. How?
It involves letting go of the fear, maybe working through past wounds that make you vulnerable, breaking those unhealthy dependencies. It's about reconnecting with your own truth, your values, your boundaries.
Getting back to yourself.
Exactly. When you achieve that emotional distance, their games just don't work on you in the same way. You see the manipulation for what it is. And that process, recognizing the abuse, breaking free, understanding that healthy relationships don't involve this stuff, that's the path to healing.
Okay. So bringing these two different takes together, the coach's advice and this look at narcissistic tactics, what are the main things we should take away about love triangles?
Well, I think it's clear they're complex, right? On one hand, as the coach pointed out, they can sometimes just stem from immaturity, selfishness, someone not being ready or willing to commit.
The entitled selfish person taking advantage.
Right. But then, on the other hand, they can be this really deliberate, harmful, manipulative tactic used by people, particularly those with narcissistic traits, specifically to control and dominate others.
And it seems like regardless of the reason behind the triangle, the advice points towards the same place: self-worth and boundaries.
Absolutely. That came through strongly from both sources. Recognizing your own value, being really clear about what you expect and need in a relationship, and crucially, spotting those red flags like consistent triangulation and acting on them. Those seem vital for protecting yourself.
Okay, so here's something maybe to leave you, the listener, thinking about. Consider how often we actually see love triangles in, movies, TV shows, books.
All the time.
Right, and sometimes they're framed as exciting, even romantic, like proof that someone is just so desirable. What role do you think those stories, those media narratives play in how we understand love triangles? Does it maybe normalize them or make us more tolerant of them in real life than we should be?
That's a really interesting question to ponder. How much does the fiction influence our reality? Definitely something worth reflecting on, maybe thinking about your own experiences and boundaries.
Yeah, it certainly is. We hope this deep dive gave you some food for thought, and we really encourage you to keep exploring this, and maybe most importantly, to prioritize building healthy, respectful relationship dynamics in your own life.
Mic check, one voice, one spark. From the shadows to the bright, let's light the dark. Red and blue views, truth in the middle, no script, just thought raw and a little civil. Every question's got layers, so we peel back facts. From the real to the surreal, we don't hold back. Voices collide where ideas